Hello, welcome to a stream, an actual live stream by yours truly, Sound Engraver. I'm a little out of practice, so hopefully that makes sense. And let me go ahead and pull this banner down. It's not really a new track anymore. It was released, I think, back in April. And so I need to start releasing more music again, which I will, but probably starting the year 2024, because in a matter of weeks, in 5 weeks, in fact, I'll be getting married. So I'm going to be kind of busy the next month or so, and then after. But yeah, it's time to catch up. It's going to be back. It's gonna be good to be back. Let me take this down. Hopefully you can hear me. Where'd everything go? All right. And Daniel Heron, thank you so much for the super chat. Let me get this banner. How do you do this? I'm out of practice. I think they changed everything. Well, they didn't change everything. They just changed how things looked. All right, there we go. And there, we are back in business. So everything, according to my prof, sounds great. You sound great. And sounding is going to be important. For now, we are not going to have a camera just because this is, well, we'll get into the details soon, but this is a new computer. And I was checking out the camera and it's not bad, but it's kind of grainy looking. And when I did some local recordings, the camera did freeze. So until I get the lighting right and it look okay, I'll probably leave the camera off. So I would say just kind of expect this avatar, the avatar with a glowing halo for a little bit. And then the avatar, of course will change if the topic is different as well. So let's get to the chat and then, yeah, I'll catch you up. That's not a phrase. This is a catch-up stream. No, it's not a condiment stream. Let's first welcome Daniel Heron with the super chat. Oh, thanks. Here's the super chat for $2. Thank you so much, my friend. And I'll be seeing you in 5 weeks for sure. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to your tux or to your suit or whatever you're wearing. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. My wonderful prof says, looking forward to your return to streaming my Tenuviel. Yes, I'm looking forward to streaming again too. And there's not really any specific topic today. I think I may have a topic next week. I was actually supposed to perform violin next week, but he's a nice guy. He's a business owner. He owns a local vineyard, and apparently he scheduled me with 2 other musicians. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't play next Sunday." So I probably won't have a performance gig until November, but that's okay. Things happen. Gigawatt is in. Isn't time relevant though? Yes, it is. All right. Yes, actually, I probably will keep the comments up to channel members and super chats. But of course, I will read your guys' comments. We've got Big Al Presents. Oh, to your question, Gigawatt, is time relative though? It could be. Depending on where you are and how fast you travel in the galaxy and how you can expand from physics. Is that right? I don't know. We'll see. Big Al Presents says, have a great stream, Sound Engraver. Thank you, my friend. Hope that new computer is working out well for you. Yeah, we'll get into that and among other things. Cortical larvae. I think you've been here before because that does sound familiar. Great textural sound designer. Always curious about the experimental work. Thank you. That was actually my first mastered track that I've done personally. Actually, so I've had all my music that I've released before since 2019 has been professionally mastered by a sound engineer. But Second Chances that I released back in April, that was my first attempt to master my own music. And I'm pretty proud of it, considering all things. It's a very simple track, under 4 minutes, with not a lot of tracks. And I got the sound I wanted, so I'm just going to keep practicing mastering my own stuff. I've always mixed my own stuff a little bit, and if I can really master the mastering process for my music, that not only saves me money, but it just saves me the process and hassle of just constantly emailing and communicating what needs fixed or what needs changed. So thank you. I appreciate that. I will say too, cortical larvae, if you're interested, that design came from, so that song had come from two sample libraries. I think I had Apple Loops for Logic Pro, I think. And then the other one, and I'll put this down too, and he has his own sample library for free, but Stefan Torto. If you go to his website, he will have his own samples and demonstrations, and he does a lot of loop and percussion and stuff like that. I just threw his one of the rhythm pieces that I liked that he had available, and then I just put it through this like uh, this filter, this vocal filter, and liked how it turned out. So a lot of the inspiration came from drum loops, and in fact, I might talk a little bit more about that if I have time, because it's just talking about art and talking about my music in particular, or music in general, is something I've been thinking of doing. But yeah, thank you. My wonderful prof says I sound great. Thank you. And then Cortical says congratulations to us. Thank you. And Lynn Green is in the house. I'm here. Uh, does this stream cut the mustard? What's the reference? Because I know that sounds supposed to sound familiar. And I forgot. Oh, condiments. Yeah, because it's a ketchup stream. Yeah, I got it. Sweet Chris Mine is here. Thank you for coming. Random question, but what is your favorite movie? Oh, let's see. My favorite movie? That's actually a hard question for me, because like some people would say, "Oh, that's such a hard question for me because I love so many movies." And I'm actually the opposite. That's a hard question for me because I just haven't seen enough movies. Um I mean, as far as experience and art is considered, I probably would just have to say, as one singular experience, probably Lord of the Rings. As far as cinema is concerned, and a faithful adaptation of Lord of the Rings, I know that's probably an easy go-to to think about. But like a movie that really moves me, that's one of the, actually, Big Al, that would be a really good video topic for your channel because you're so into movies. But yeah, that's a good question. As for now, I would say um, Lord of the Rings, and then if I had to choose between the 3 films, I would have to say Return of the King, because there's just so much heart behind that. So I hope that was a fair question. Or a good answer to your nice question. Final Fantasy fan is with us, and I hope to do more soundtracks in the future, and of course for video games in particular. And Final Fantasy is definitely on the dock for some of that. Okay, and Samuel Proctor, welcome back after 2 years. Welcome back to the world. It's good to see you, man. One would think it would be an easier choice for a favorite if you haven't seen as many. Well, yeah, that's why I kind of answered the way I did, because I feel like Lord of the Rings is an obvious answer, but at the same time, I haven't seen so many movies. Um, I'm the way with movies like parents are with their many children. Like, I love each movie individually, and they're in their own unique way. That's kind of like, yeah, like for instance, like, as far as like the Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Um, that's a really well done animated film, and it got me in different ways. But it's like I can't say a movie is my favorite. Really, kind of like how us musicians, um, we get asked sometimes, like especially if you're classically trained, like, oh, who's your favorite composer? It's like, can I name 10 of them? Because that's not really a fair question, even though you asked a nice question. Sweet Chris of mine. All right. Oh, and you say you still haven't gotten around to watching Lord of the Rings. Hey, you know what? That's okay, man. I have yet to watch many classic movies. I hate to say this, but this is part of my life now with Professor Geek, is that we're getting into movies that I should have seen like many years ago. Like what's one major one I know that I've seen? Back to the Future. I have yet to see Back to the Future. And so in the future, I will be watching Back to the Future, a movie that many saw in the past. So, yeah. All right. So let's catch up on what's going on. So hopefully this will be my Sunday streams again. Of course, I'm getting married in 5 weeks. Anything can happen. My schedule, as probably you heard from Professor too, with his busy schedule, like we're pretty much taking on as much work as we can to pay this wedding off. We're about like I did the math just a few hours ago. We're about 72% paid. So not just the wedding, but also the honeymoon. And it's like it's still a long way to go, and we've got 5 weeks. So I'm working. I work two jobs. I work a part-time job at this retail place here, and then also I'm actually it's been quite a blessing, but I've gotten a lot more students, a lot more music students. I have about 22 music students. So if I'm not teaching or working or driving or sleeping, most of my free time is just going through the things for our wedding, and then also if I have extra time, I just want to read a book or I just want to compose a little now that I have this new computer. I don't really. I will actually. I'll just say it as it's on the top of my head. Going forward, probably until November, I likely. Maybe if I have a moment of inspiration and time, unless I have that, I likely will not be having content in the week. During the week, it's just I just have no time for YouTube because any extra time I do want, I want it for reading something like reading a book or working on my music or writing. And I almost have little time for that. So YouTube will be still. I still want to keep up the streams, but YouTube will still be a little bit on the um, uh, kind of still on the down low. Just not as much content, of course, as I would like. But hey, there's a major life change happening, and we're working so long along a lot of hours. So, but it's all been good. I feel great. I don't feel any. I think the pressure will really happen more like the week before the wedding. I'm still not feeling it, and and that's probably a good thing too. I just kind of Prof and I are kind of joking. We're going to be so happy to see our family, and I have family traveling from all over the country because I was the vagabond. I was the one moving. I'm like my family stayed put for all those years. I was the one that lived in like 5 or so states. So a lot of people are coming from many thousands of miles, and that will be fun. And I'm really grateful that they will come. But Prof and I were talking about like it's just gonna be nice when also as beautiful as it will be, I think it will be, and as wonderful as it will be just to get together, especially seeing Fan Man for the first time in person, and also Daniel for the first time in person. Um, it'll be wonderful, but then I'm also I'm looking forward to it being also behind us because it's such a major event. So that's understandable, right? So there's that. So, oh, and actually, Samuel Proctor, I'm sure Prof has Back to the Future as a physical copy. He is a physical media person, and I support that as well. And if he doesn't have it, we would probably acquire it somehow. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Prof is saying, yeah, that's next on the movie night list. Yeah, that'll definitely be fun. And then the next major motion picture I need to see is Indiana Jones. Of course, not the recent ones. I know that, but the major tent poles of the cinema of the time. So Indiana Jones will be next on the docket. Yeah, I think docket's the right word for that. Yeah. So anyway, what's happening here? So first of all, so the reason why I took a month off, as you probably all know, is like uh, my computer of 8 years of service passed away at 14 years old. So I had a 2010. So I had a 2010 since 2015. I got that machine for $500, free shipping, and it was a machine. It was like a machine in a good way. Like it was a beast, and it did everything that needed to be done, like as far as music, software, and production. I didn't need anything fancy. I didn't need anything with a lot of processing power for gaming because I don't game on computers and stuff like that. I wasn't doing YouTube at the time, so my activity on that computer for years was just composing music and maybe having Microsoft Word for my writing. So uh, last time, it was around last year, around November, it was showing signs, and it actually went kaput a little bit, and I'm like, "Oh, I gotta." Or no, it didn't. It didn't. No, I'm misremembering that. It just stalled a lot. And even after cleaning it some and just really, rebooting and changing the hard drive, or not changing the hard drive, but just going through a huge processing, cleaning and process and all that. Like, okay, well, it's slow, but it's gonna. I think it will work. So it did work actually. I got another machine last November that I did not like. It just, well, actually, I liked it just fine, but I made the mistake of updating it to the most recent operating system, and that operating system was terrible. I hated it. I'm a Mac user when it comes to computers, but sometimes the recent updates, the software updates or the operating system updates, it's bad. It's awful, and it's not compatible with recording software or things like OBS, even though OBS is kind of problematic anyway. So I after like a month of frustration, I returned it within that threshold, that duration where you can return it for a full refund, even though I had to pay for the packaging. That was terrible. And so I kept my 2010 computer. So that was, I think, the 2018 or 2019, and then I returned it. I didn't want it, so I kept my 2010 for another, year, and then until recently. And then finally, I was working on my music, and then all of a sudden, it just didn't log on my name. Like it turned on, and it didn't do anything more than that. And then so I checked the hard drive and made sure everything was looking nice there. And then it uploaded, and I'm like, well, that was almost 3 months of things not being saved and backed up and stuff like that. So I spent like a week, not a week, but like I spent a few days just um in between jobs and stuff, just loading up all my most recent music projects and my science fiction writing and my teacher projects and stuff like that. I lost probably a good for one software in particular that didn't save, so I did lose about a month of work. But as far as my music compositions were concerned, I got everything, so that was good. And so everything was fine for a couple of weeks, and then finally it didn't. It turned on, and that's all it could do. So I think that was God's grace, that little interim of just being able to save my stuff before that could happen again, and then 2 weeks it happened again, and I was without a computer. And then I had to rely on my phone for all this stuff. And then, so I just waited a month to get a new computer. I didn't want a new computer because we're paying for the wedding, but I found something. And actually, if this machine, this is nice. It's huge. It's like 27 inches. It's massive. And once you do have once we have the camera on, you're gonna see how like wide it is. I look very far away, by the way. I'm way far away from the camera. It's kind of hard to get used to. My violin students online were having a hard time, like, "Whoa, you're so far away." I'm like, "Sorry." um, but I mean, it looks okay. I just have to get the lighting right. But where was I going with that? Um, I can't remember. I was talking about this computer. Well, it's great. That's all it is. It's working really well. Maybe I'll remember my train of thought, or get my train of thought back when I get it. But yes, it's working fine. And oh yeah, so it was for what it's worth, it could run for about 4 to 5 years, and the money's worth. It'll be fine. Um, and I think I will be happy for a few years. It is a 2017 though, so people say, "Well, why don't you get a new computer?" I'm like, "Well, I don't. All I need is good processing power for my audio stuff, and I need good storage. And to be honest, though, I don't need more than 16 gigabytes of storage." Like people say, you gotta have 32, you gotta have 64. It's like, man, if you're running a company, maybe. But I don't ever need that because I'm always cleaning out unwanted files and junk and stuff like that. So I know something about a thing or two about computers where I can maintain them. So people are like, wow, you purchased an old one. I'm like, well, if it functions and it looks nice. I mean, I think it looks great. Back when things were built to last. I hope 2017 was a year where things were built to last. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, so that is my computer story. So that was August. What were we? September 17. So not composing at all. I didn't work on any creative thing for a month. I read science fiction. I played games. For my spare time, I was not doing anything. So when I got my computer back, I loaded. It took a week to load everything up, and then I just started composing again, like like up till 2 in the morning because it had been so long since I had composed. Um, and then somewhere and it was probably for the best because like August, and you saw with the prof a little bit with his streaming, but August I got the worst flu. And people, so I tested negative. Like people asked me, "Did you test negative or positive?" And I took a test, sorta, for the little test that I did, and it turned up negative. So I'm like, okay, it said negative. I'm going to say as much and stuff like that. But I was teasing some associates saying I kind of wish it said positive because I was out for a good 2.5 weeks. I was in bed for like 2.5 days, just not able to get up and stuff like that. And it took about a month to recover, like to get my energy back. Like I was working at like 80% stamina. Like things that really don't tire me really tired me for a good month. So it must have been a variant of some kind. And if it is, I'm immune to that variant. So I'm glad all this happened though before the wedding, like 2 months before the wedding. So that was fun. August was kind of hard, but the time to get sick though was right. It was absolutely right. It was a couple weeks before we went to a place we take Alyssa, the prof's daughter, to. It was 2 weeks before that, and it was like 2 months before the wedding. So I feel great now. I feel healthy. I'm trying to stay healthy, stay slim for the wedding dress because we paid that off and it looks great. My dress looks awesome. But we don't have to talk about the wedding. We could talk about other stuff. Um, the next thing I wanted to uh, uh, talk about actually, let me grab a swig of water. Um, is my violin. This might actually, if I think about it, I'll try to remember this. This actually is a life lesson. If I forget to talk about my life lesson on the stream, I'll probably talk about it on a separate video. But in the last couple of years, if you've seen me any of my music videos, oh, thank you, Daniel Heron. Thank you so much for the super chat. You say, well, wait, should I put it up? Oh, no, I don't want to put it up. I read that too late. What do you say? Yeah, sure, go for it. We'll call you a solicitor. We'll send the agent, the Catholic agents. You know, the coordinator. We'll get their guy. We'll get her men to escort you out. But thank you so much for the super chat. Okay, so where are we going? Well, I was talking about my violin. So if you've seen in the last couple of years anything related to music, my videos related to music, maybe me performing violin or doing a demonstration on violin. I think there was one point I was doing did I play Christmas music at one point when I was here in Virginia? But I had this violin that I bought back in Raleigh a few years ago, and it was a light colored violin. It's a light brown. In some ways it kind of looks more orange than brown. In fact, it's actually not brown. The varnish is like a lighter orange. And this was the maker is Liu Chen, a Chinese maker that actually is pretty standard for things like classical music. And basically, I should probably just tell you the whole story because it's just a really good life lesson. But before I tell the story, I wanted to say that it's more of a I wasn't ever happy with this violin. So I decided to I've always had in mind to sell it, and I had this adult student who was looking into other instruments, and he I said, well, it had been on my mind to sell this instrument. So if I gave you a quote in a few weeks, would you be interested? And he, having gotten a new well-paying job, he's like, yeah, I'll have the funds to. I'd really love to have that violin, you know. So I sold him my violin, a good standard cheap bow, and also the case that went with that violin. But basically, my reason for selling that violin was I was just never happy with it. I bought it. It wasn't so much a buyer's remorse. It was more like it was the sound. I tried on like I tried on I tried 10 to 12 violins that were within my budget at the time in North Carolina. And that was the one that sounded the best, that felt the best. But when I was practicing it, like right after, like I drove back to the studio, I drove back to the place I was staying at, and I was like, "Oh, no, it's okay, it's okay." I'm fine with it and stuff like that. But if I had to rate it, as far as satisfaction, I was like 5 out of 10. I was like maybe 55, 58% satisfied with the violin. There was nothing wrong with the violin. The sound was good. The construction was fine. It was a good working, I would say, upper student slash professional violin. Like I've never really had the budget for a really nice violin. That will be someday, but just not now. And there's a point to the story, I promise. But I remember before moving here to Virginia, I was like, I'm just I'm not happy with it. But I'll use it. I need to use a nice sounding violin or a nice enough sounding violin to teach. And the one reason why I wasn't ever happy with it was because like the fingerboard felt too wide. It just didn't. It's kind of like getting a car because you need a new car, but buying a car within your budget, but just never satisfied with the feel of the car, with the power steering. Like I really often compare the violin playing to and the bow and the kind of bow you use for if the bow doesn't work, if the violin doesn't work, it feels like you're driving a car with bad power steering. You have to do double the effort to get the sound that you want. Whereas a violin that feels right, that is constructed just wonderfully, even if it's like 8 grand, there's a difference in the feel of your playing if you're a professional player. And I just didn't have that with this violin that you've seen in videos. So I never was attached to it. And when I came upon the idea of like talking to the student who was interested, like, yeah, let me, I'll give you the whole thing for a grand. And he's like, yeah, that's perfect. It was about 70% of what I had paid for. So having it a few years, it was fine. So the question is, well, what about your other violin? Like, what was wrong with that violin? So you may have seen even in previous videos. I mean, I kind of want to show you on the camera, but I won't, just in case it's fuzzy. I might do a separate video on this, but in earlier videos, I had this really, and I have it now, this dark brown violin, and it came from my uncle's grandfather. He's not my uncle by blood. He married my aunt, my sister's sister, and we're talking in the South now. But my uncle's grandfather, in somewhere in the flyover states, had restored this violin in the 1930s, and we got it fixed up. And this was at the Little Rock Violin Shop many years ago. We got it fixed up and dressed up. Uh, and appraised. I think they appraised it at 2 grand or something like that. And then my uncle had another violin that was a lot more expensive, but he wanted to keep that one to keep it safe in the family. But he gave me this one, and people were saying, "Oh, it's a Hoff. It's a very standard originally a German made violin." And Hoff, HOPF, is a pretty, I would say it's a name that circulates among the violin profession, at least in the way of violin makers and violin shops and luthiers and stuff like that. So I think I pronounce luthiers, maybe luthier, just the violin maker. I think that the American English standard is probably luthier, so I'm just going to go ahead with that word. Never knew how to really pronounce it, just know how to spell it. So with all that, I took the Hoff and I played it, and I always loved it. It's a compared to a classically shaped violin. The violin has kind of like that round, kind of rotund, that very supple waist, and the kind of rotund. It looks feminine, right? It's a feminine figure for the shape of the violin. This violin in particular had always a slight box look to it. It was a lot narrower, and the shape was not as round, and it's slighter. It's lighter, it's slighter, but the fingerboard, I always loved the feel of my hands, my fingers, traction and everything. If you if you're a musician of any instrument, you would understand. Oh yeah, I like the feel of that instrument. Oh, I love the sound that this particular piano makes. I mean, you're very sensitive. Again, it's like driving a car that you like, that you prefer, to another make and model that you don't prefer. It's exactly the same. Well, not exactly, of course, but it's the same application. And so, uh, I've always loved this Hoff, this weirdly shaped violin. But if you put it on, if you have strings that like really nice sounding strings, it carries a very nice sound. And I've always loved the feel of it. And so I had performed with it for many years. I taught with it. I recorded my first albums with it. You've seen it in some SuperCollider videos, playing with live effects and stuff like that. And sometime during my teaching in North Carolina, it had developed a crack on its belly. And this crack, I went to take it in the regional violin maker shop, and they said, "Hey, listen, we can give you two options with this. This crack will we can glue it and seal it for $400 with no guarantee that it will not come back." Or we can do another procedure that is $800 and you will have the guarantee that it will never come back. And me being a poor music teacher trying to pay off debt, I tried. I'm like, well, all I can do is afford the $400 if that's okay. And they say, okay. So I had it there for a week. They gave me to play another violin. They gave me a really they let me choose too, and I chose this 8 grand violin that just felt so awesome. It was it was the best violin I ever played, and I played that for a week and loved it. Um, and I got back to it, and then the violin was fine. I went back to playing on it, and it was great. I had my violin back. Well, around the time I think it was a little before 2019. I think it was around 2020. My soundboard inside the violin started. I heard it roll, so it needed to be readjusted, and I was just having a bad day. I was feeling emotional. I was like, oh, I got debt to pay and all that stuff, and then I have to take it back in. Now, by the way, if you are a violinist or a string player, it's pretty easy to line up the sound post, not soundboard, sound post, under the foot of the bridge. But what made me so sad about that was, one, I couldn't practice anymore. The second thing was because I couldn't fix it. I had to take it back in. But then I noticed the crack had come back, probably about a good several months, a handful of months later. And I remember leaning my head against the wall saying, I don't have the money to fix this. And in a very looking back now, I would say this was a very irrational decision I had made. But I'm like, you know what? I just need a new violin. I just need a new violin. So put the Hoff back in its case, and I said, you know what? It's just time to get a nicer violin. But I didn't really have the funds to get a nicer violin. I did through uh, a small community did ask for a donation to help with the expense to budget, and then I tried on new violins, and I ended up getting the one that I was about 58% satisfied with, and so the story doesn't go too much longer. I played that new violin for for a good handful of years. It served me, yeah, for about 4 years now, 3 years, 2.5. I'd say 2.5. Just playing it, but never singing with it, if that makes sense. And so I went recently, um, after talking with this adult student and saying like, yeah, if he's interested in buying it, maybe I'll use the funds to get the crack on the Hoff fixed again, and this time I will pay it in full. So a few weeks ago, this is still August. Don't have a computer, so I have time to do this. No, I sold my violin, put the funds, got the funds for taking it to the local violin maker here and repairman. Great guy, and I saw ratings on his like Google reviews and stuff like that. The person is good at what he or she does when people travel hours to visit them, and this person's like not even 20 minutes away, and I'm like, I'm blessed. It's I have lived in cities with wonderful violin makers, and I have lived in cities where the violin maker has a lot of know-how, but kind of talks down, like, "Oh, you simpleton. You're just a teacher. I'm a violin maker," or whatever. So this guy was very humble, very, well-rounded, probably, I would say, fairly highly educated man. He's well-spoken, um, and it's an indicator of a good, wholesome, family lifestyle. Where we are in the area, just a lot of good family people. Um, you could just tell the divorce rate is not that high. It's awesome. So anyway, very down to earth, and I told him, I said, "Hey, listen, I'm just interested in getting the crack on this belly, sealed permanently." And he was looking at it, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I see it. Um, they they sealed it. There's no crack. It's visible, but that's not a sign of damage." And I'm like, "Oh." So, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking 2.5 years, I didn't have that crack on my Hoff, but I got a new instrument. I paid, like, $1,300 for a new, violin that I didn't really need in the first place, that I was never really satisfied, all because I was all mad at one point. I'm like, "This is it. I'm getting a new violin." He's like, "No, yeah, the crack is visible, but they did a good job sealing it. It's not it didn't come back." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So he went to look at it some more. He's like, "Oh, I do see a crack in the peg box, and that's gonna really wedge wide if you keep turning the wooden pegs on it." I'm like, "Oh, okay. So I can fix that for you." I'm like, "Sure." I was planning on spending like $900 getting this thing fixed. I didn't say that out loud, but he said, "Yeah, you know what? We could get you new peg. We can do a couple things. We can insert like a little metal ring so this crack will not wedge or become any wider, so your violin will not be any further damaged. Or I can install mechanical pegs if you're not married to the idea of traditional wooden pegs." Now, if you're a violin or string player out there, please hear me out. A lot of people would not like mechanical pegs versus wood pegs because the aesthetics of the violin is wood, right? So a lot of people would be married to the idea of, no, I gotta have my wooden pegs and stuff like that. Now, I was fine with mechanical pegs. I'm like, "Oh, so you would install these and that would not make the crack wider?" He's like, "Yeah." And then when he was done, he's like, "That with a little bit of a tune up, he it amounted to like 1/8 of the price I was expecting." So I'm like, "Yay, that's awesome." And so that was after an hour of his fixing it, maybe an hour and a half, and I had come back later, and, let me grab a swig of water because this story's almost done, I promise. So, I come back in, and the pegs are as easy to tune as a guitar. It's so good. So, all musicians out there who are string players, if you don't care about wooden pegs, get mechanical pegs. They are amazing. They're so easy to tune. It's magic. It's magic. So he comes in, or no, I come in, and he's done, and he says, I was looking into the story of this violin." He said, "What'd you say it was?" I said, "Well, they say it's a Hoff." He's like, "Where'd you get it appraised?" And or "What did you get it appraised for?" And I said, "This was appraised, I think, about 2 grand." He's like, "Okay, 2 grand. Um, I want to tell you the story behind this violin, but I don't want you to be offended." I'm like, "You can't say anything that's going to offend me." He's like, "Well, the value of this instrument actually isn't 2 grand. It's more like 1 grand, if that. It's probably $800, and I want to tell you the story why." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, absolutely, fine. That's great." He said, "Here's the thing. You said it was restored around the 30s, and I think whoever had this violin at the time put in a new fingerboard. It's a very nice fingerboard," and I knew that already because I always loved the feel of this fingerboard. And then he's like, "You have a really nice bridge. It's an original." Well, it's not an original bridge. We don't know actually, but he's like, "Wherever this came from, it's a really nice bridge. You don't have to replace that. That's awesome." And then you just put on some nice strings, and I'll give you a new tailpiece for free, and we're good to go. I'm like, "Cool." The story behind the reason why it's so cheap is that the indicator was the shape of the violin. It's not a round, classically shaped violin. It's a It's that box kind of narrow violin. And he's like, I was looking in the shape, and so what the story is that this violin was likely made by a farmer in the Czechoslovakia region, but that area, maybe he called it like the Saxony region, back in the 1800s. Back in the 1800s, in that part of Europe, it was a common pastime for farmers, when they were done with the harvest, uh, to make instruments, and one of the instruments that was a common pastime was violin. Was to make a violin, and so in somewhere in the 1800s, and it could be earlier than that, it could be a little bit later than that, but definitely it was quite a common thing for that part of the Europe, like East Europe, getting into the Germanic regions, for these farmers to carry their amateurly made violins on their backs in sacks, to go to a violin dealer and to get some money. And these violin dealers would take these amateurly made violins, and they would stamp the name of something like Hoff, or whatever was closest, whoever the family violin makers, whoever were closest to the region, the said region. So in this case, if the education is sound, what that means is my violin was made amateurly by a farmer somewhere in the 1800s, sometime in the 1800s, and that farmer would take it to a dealer, and the dealer was closer to maybe the family name Hoff. So it's not an original Hoff. Hoffs actually can be priced at like 10 grand, depending. And so I've always had, now it's this amateurly made violin that's like not even worth 1800 or like $800 or whatever, with a nice fingerboard, a nice bridge, and with nice strings. It's going to sound nice. And so that was pretty funny to know. He's like, so that doesn't bother you? I'm like, actually, no. I like my violin even more. I like the fact that my violin could have been made by a farmer in the 1800s in that region of Europe. So no, I'm not mad. This is really cool. So even though it's not an original German Hof make, it was there's some history to it, and I'll always keep it. That's the thing, is I'll always keep it. So long. That was a long story. The moral of the story is, first, don't make irrational decisions based on anger. Like, get your violin fixed. If the soundboard rolls, you can take it to a violin shop. They'll set it in place for next to nothing, and then you can have your violin again. And you don't need to buy a new violin for that reason. So I really should have just taken it to a violin maker again and say, hey, is this cracked back? And they said, no, it's in place. I'd have kept it. So that was many years of, well, that was good 3 years of not having a violin I liked. Paying for a violin I was never really satisfied with, even though it's a good, decent model. There's nothing wrong with it. But I was never attached to it. And so that was my August. It was a very interesting August. So I do have my original Hoff, not so Hoff, amateurly made farmer, Czech, Saxony area. And so needless to say, I will be probably doing a lot more violin stuff in the future with my music stuff. So let's take a break and see what's happening in the chat. And then maybe some things I have in mind to do for the channel going forward. All right. Samuel Proctor says, I'm going to take a wild guess that the dress will be covered in pixelated music notes, probably. Oh, wait, my dress? No, my dress is awesome. I don't know why I was thinking of, yeah, I was thinking of something that Daniel should not wear for the wedding. Big Al says Daniel Heron will just be called the cousin you describe as special. Yeah. Yeah. Super true. Deflating Atheism says, I've heard guitarists talk about having to fight the instrument when playing poorly constructed guitars. It has to be a difference in millimeters. You make a really good point. The difference as far as construction, it could be very small, like as in a matter of just millimeters or under, but when it doesn't feel right, it's a huge world of terrible feelings. Andre said you couldn't stream because you got sick and then your computer broke. That this can't be all a coincidence. Sound engraver. No, well, I mean, it was just a mishap of mishaps. Things that happen and that delayed my being on stream. Thank you guys for listening to my story. Why does YouTube only give me the reminder for someone named Bob is in the house? You say YouTube only gives me a reminder 42 minutes after you go live. That's a shame, but I'm very happy with the people who have turned into I can't talk, who've come in. Hey guys, like without leaving my stream, I want to see if your phones are doing this, but YouTube, like if I go back to like video history, whether it's my videos or props videos or even videos in the queue, like in my feed, you go to, unless it's a really big name YouTube person, have you guys noticed the amount of likes on people's videos? Like someone who has over 200,000 views, but like only 10 likes. Have you seen that? I've noticed this like a few days ago. I was like, why does this person, like, he's a very popular guy. He's got like over 1 million subscribers. It's like, why is he only having 10 likes? So the whole like thing, maybe my phone is outdated. I'm just having an outdated app, but something strange was going on. I didn't know if you guys were noticing that too. Andre Hernandez says, I heard you watched the Lone Ranger movie. What are your thoughts? I did enjoy it. It's a very different movie. Again, I'm bad with movies. By bad, I mean I just don't watch enough of them to make comparisons to other things. I enjoyed it. It had great pacing, a lot of beautiful cinematography, one heck of an action scene on 2 trains. Now, as far as just my general impression of the Lone Ranger, what's it? Is it Army Hammer and then Johnny Depp? First of all, I came from the Northwest and I spent my summers in Montana. So anything that has that frontiersman, like in South Dakota, I'll immediately like it for that reason. But it also has to be a good movie. I enjoyed it, not really knowing all the analysis and specialty that Prof has, with the American frontier mythos, and then also uh, he can do like a screen by screen, shot by shot analysis of just a lot of things that goes into that work and in terms of cinema and storytelling. I really did like it. I know people have mentioned before that they don't prefer it. Um, on the one hand, I can see why, but Prof made it particularly interesting that like for instance, I asked him this legitimate question because I wanted to know what he thought. There were times, like if you're not careful, you could see this version of the Lone Ranger as a Gary Stu, because things happen kind of almost like the crazy random happenstance, like, oh, that shouldn't have happened, but it happened because he's this, he's like the spirit walker or whatever that he's called, the title he's called. But the reason why he wouldn't be a Gary Stu in that way is because the whole movie is going through the perspective of Tonto's memory. So it's like someone telling you their version of the story. Hey, this happened. This is kind of random. This is kind of crazy. But it's going through old Tonto storytelling, that this kind of mythical being, that is the spirit walker with his spirit horse and bringing the lawless to justice. And so he's trying, like you could say, Tonto's trying to inspire himself, as this kind of old figure in this, museum display. And then by doing that, he's inspiring this little kid, to never take off the mask. And so because we're working really with the meta narrative and working with his memory of the Lone Ranger, it could make sense that, well, therefore it's not a Gary Stu thing. Whereas if we were working through our perspective of them moving through time, like in the present, that might be like, okay, or maybe he has some deity about him that he needs to roam the lands and bring the lawless men to justice and stuff like that. But as far as the story is concerned, I did enjoy the story, and I think it's beautifully done too. It's a well done. The set work, sheesh, like a lot of it is really good looking. Yeah. Brian Gilmartin is in. I can't speak. Long time ago. Long time ago. Long time no see, Sound Engraver. Also, sorry I'm late. I just got back from dinner with a buddy. Hey, that's fun. You got to hang out with your friends. Samuel says, I've heard that scenario has been happening a few years now. The obtuse views like to the like ratio. Yeah, well, yeah, weird. Like, yeah, videos that get hundreds of thousands of views but only 10 likes. It's like something's not right. Someone named Bob says it's not you, it's YouTube messing with everyone's channel. They also edit and censor comments for no apparent reason. I saw one person's video like have the comments turned off, and I never saw that video before, like, or that particular person. So that's probably something that's also happening, just depending on what your topic is. RJ from the Fourth Age, he had if you hadn't seen his recent video, it's a thumbnail that says the future is not female, and he was just talking about the differences of men and women and what their preferences are for storytelling. And my two devices that were not my phone could take his video, but for probably a good day, my phone would not load up his video. But I was not the only person to have that happen. So yeah. Oh, okay. Good question. Good question, Andreas. Andreas asks thoughts on Hans Zimmer's music for that movie. I particularly liked his score, especially his expansion of the William Tell Overture. Now, I could hear some moments where it was getting to be the point where like Hans Zimmer was getting more into what you hear with his version of Superman and what you hear with Inception and stuff. Obviously, you can't work with sounds like, what you would hear with Inception because this is a Western. So you work with the orchestra. But I'm going to say this about Hans Zimmer. I'm just going to say it as controversial as you like, and I'll say it as an electronic music composer. Hans Zimmer shines the brightest with his orchestra music. He just does. I'm not saying like he can't experiment with sounds like he's done with Dune and Inception and Interstellar and stuff like that. And I'm not even saying something like Interstellar is a bad score. It's a very new experimental score that I like, but I do not have the inclination of listening to Interstellar, the score, without watching the movie. Whereas I could listen to, for a little bit at least, the score for The Lone Ranger. He's just good with the orchestra. I really wish he would go back to the orchestra. There is something very inspiring and magical with his orchestral scores. And again, I'm not saying he can't write electronic music. I'm not saying he shouldn't write electronic music, but this is true of all composers, by the way. I mean, dare I say this would have been true even if the likes of John Williams pursued electronic music. There's this school of thought, and this will be a separate video. I will be doing more musically topical videos, even though they don't get as much views as my other stuff. But whatever. I'm a musician. I got to talk about music. But this is true of any film composer who dabble in film music with exclusively electronic sounds. They get really lazy because they think generic chord progressions and cool sounds will suffice. And I think this is true with Hans Zimmer to an extent. Now people say, no, his Dune score was so experimental. It's experimental, but it also, the reason why people like the Dune score so much is how it was absolutely and exclusively integral to the movie cinematic experience. Kind of like with Blade Runner. A little bit like with the, what was it, Blade Runner 2047, 2049? I forgot the year. I keep forgetting the year of the new Blade Runner movie. You really are experiencing the soundtrack because of what you see with the visuals. Now, this is not a bad thing by itself. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but the problem is you could actually fall into this trap as a composer saying, well, this is good enough. This is cool enough. And therefore, I'm fine with not working with theme, not working with all the little nuances that, someone like John Williams works in. Like, I was listening to an analysis of the Harry Potter theme, the Sorcerer's Stone theme, or what's the first movie? Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And I was looking at what's his name? Charles Cornell. He's a great YouTuber who does music analysis. He's a jazz pianist and he knows his stuff. He analyzes different pop culture music. It's a wonderful channel. And I was listening to Harry Potter, his like short analysis of Harry Potter, and I really, there is something transcendental, not in an East Asian way or Oriental religious way, but there's something transcending, I think I should say, that transcends that, like, the human mind and the soul, when something like the theme for Harry Potter lines up perfectly with the image, but it can be listened to by itself as a thing. The Harry Potter, at least that theme, oh, it works so well by itself, but it makes it even more magical when it, like, it syncs up right when Hagrid gives Harry Potter the book that has the picture of his parents when he's a baby. Like, oh, John Williams, man, he knew what to do. Like, he always knows what to do. And you can't do that when you get lazy with electronic music. Now, you can do that with electronic music, but people say, the sound, it sounds cool. It's cool. I'll work with a drone with some, bandwidth cut off, and we're gonna have this little noise sweep, and we're gonna have this arpeggiation and stuff. And I work with those sounds all the time. I love those sounds. But in the cinematic experience, in the movie going experience, it can get tiring. It can really actually tire the viewer. So thank you for these super chats, Daniel. I'm getting kind of silly, but also need a drink of water. So Daniel, who is the soundtracks expert with his Soundtracks with Birdman channel, you say Dune was horrible, Interstellar was amazing. Now, I remember, like, my dad's right there with you. I don't think my dad has seen Dune, but he loves the Interstellar score. I do too. I'll have to listen to it to make a final assessment of it. So I don't remember it being amazing, but I do. I remember watching the movie, and I really do remember liking that score. Dune, I get why people thought it was the best thing in the world as far as music is concerned, but I know all about electronic music, and it's just like musical sand. Does that make sense? Like, you're in a sandstorm and it's musical sand. Like, you're in the musical sandstorm with the Dune score. It's like, no, this is the experience. This is what Paul Atreides was going through. It's like he wasn't hearing that music in his head. Yeah, I could talk about that in length, but anyway, okay, so Brian Gilmartin actually follows up what Daniel was saying with you're saying you were unironically questioning whether Zimmer still knows the difference between musical instrument and a murder weapon. And this is the trap that a lot of electronic music composers fall into. And the trap is, well, whatever's lacking, let's just make it louder. So, like, a lot of people, a lot of composers, and even instrumental composers like orchestra and stuff, they fall into this trap, especially the academics. Oh, this will be a video. Oh my gosh, the university professors who teach you composition, they fall into this trap, not realizing it. Oh yeah. In fact, I'm just going to give you a tease because this will be a separate video for sure. Music professors and music composers, they fall into this trap no matter what media or medium, like orchestra or electronic. They fall into the trap of, oh, well, we need to fill in the space. You know how good dance or a good piece of visual art or a good photo has negative space? There is something that makes people really, really, really nervous about negative space. And what do I mean by negative space in music? It can mean a couple of things. The first thing, it can mean absolute silence. Even in something like the Batman animated series, we'll have like a good 2 minutes without music. That's awesome for a cartoon. That's amazing, and you feel it. It works like a film. You'll see that with film noir and stuff like that too. So silence is one thing for negative space, but the other thing too is texture. The trap that music professors fall into is they try to be, and not just music professors, but like people who work in the new contemporary classical music stage, like everything is modern. They fall into the trap of, oh, we got to go so far beyond the bounds of all expectations of what this musical instrument sounds like, what this orchestra can sound like. We got to expand the gamut. We got to, cross those thresholds and cross those boundaries and make crazy sounds off of all these instruments. And what happens is, and if you listen for it, you're going to hear it often, they make the whole orchestra or the whole electronic piece monophonic, meaning all the orchestra is one instrument. It's not an orchestra of individual voices and parts. It's all one instrument. So if you do something on the violin that sounds really crazy and cool, you got to find the similarity, a similar sound and technique with the clarinet and with the trumpet. And professors fall into this trap all this time with new contemporary classical music. Is like, I gotta make the string quartet sound all the same. Like they all need to sound like the same instrument. It's like, well, you got the bass, and why not have the bass do something, maybe pluck, while the like two other parts do another thing, and another part does another thing. You can have three things going on with a string quartet. Or with the orchestra, it's like, rather than having like 68 unique pieces and voices for the orchestra, all these contemporary classical music people, they want to make the orchestra sound like one instrument all the time. All the time. So meaning, like, if the orchestra is doing one, if there's all the instruments are doing the same gesture, they're going to morph into a different gesture, and they're going to morph into a different sound, and they're going to morph into a different idea. But it's all going to be the same instruments doing, like the violin doing what the piano's doing and stuff like that. And it gets so monophonic. It's monophony. It's not even homophony. It's monophony, like one singular voice. And that's where Hans Zimmer, and I did not mean to go on this rant, but I haven't streamed a lot, so I have a lot of energy. But that's the trouble with the electronic music composers and orchestra music composers, is like they don't know how to work with variance. No matter how much they say, oh, we're so sonically diverse, it's like, no, you don't know how to work with space. You don't know how to work with a breath. You don't know how to work with negative space. You don't know how to work with polyphony anymore. Polyphony was the one thing you had to do. You had to learn as a composition student. And now you're telling me like the orchestra has to be doing the same thing all the time. It's like, no. Now, some professors would get back at me, say, hey, we know how to compose silence. We know how to integrate silence. But here's the problem with that. When they integrate silence, it's usually all the instruments integrating silence. So like let's say a professor would compose something for like a 13-piece ensemble. Usually if they're working with silence, you'll have the piano do something. And then you'll maybe have a clarinet and a flute do another thing, and then those instruments will do something while the other one, all the other instrumentalists are, not doing anything. And then you're going to merge the other instruments to match that thing, but they're all going to be silent. And then there's going to be more silence, more pockets of silence, and then more activity, and then more pockets of random activity and silence and stuff like that. So it's not working like the traditional way of using a bass line, using rests, using harmony, using a melody. And to Brian's point on the Dune score, if you're thinking everything is so loud and sounds like a murder weapon, it's because people are losing their sensibilities for space and silence and differences of activity within the electronic score, both the electronic and the orchestra. Super important to understand that. And this takes time. It takes practice, and it takes constant self-assessment. I do it all the time. It's like, oh, I didn't use enough percussion here. I didn't use enough rhythm here. Oh, I used the same rhythm for all 8.5 minutes. I mean, you have to be kind of critical with your stuff and try to make it better. All right, continuing on. Samuel Proctor says, I mean, it is on a desert planet. I'm like, well, yeah, that's the whole point that Zimmer was probably going for. He's like, I want you to think that you are surrounded by, I don't know how to do the Hans Zimmer voice. I'm trying to, he's probably a wonderful man to talk to. He's probably really fun to talk with and stuff like that. But he's like, I want these sounds to sound like you are in the sandstorm. Brian says, speaking of silence, the very last stage of Mega Man 2 has no music right before the final boss. See, that's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Um, silence is an instrument. Silence is has its own impact. I wouldn't say silence is an instrument. That's kind of a cheap way of, but you have to incorporate it very, very well. Yep. Yep, yep, yep. And or if not silence, at least space. So going from like 16 or 17 voices to 2 or 3. Like you have to be able to do that too. All right. Uh Samuel Proctor says, I remember my parents watching Dune at a party and thought I should read the book. Now I already know what's going to happen in the next one. Yeah, if it happens. I haven't seen the movie, by the way. I've only read the book. Um, I would just rather read the books. Um, Dune, the film, from what I saw in the trailer, didn't look like what I saw in my head. And it's kind of funny, like, I know that's kind of some people would call it a fault. One example, I will, prof. My wonderful prof wants me to watch the adaptation for Something Wicked This Way Comes, the Disney film. And I know it's probably a really good adaptation, but I have such a specific look, like that, and it's people say, "Well, you can't say your imagination's better than what's on the film." And it's like, I'm not saying it's better. It's just what's in my head. What's in my head with Something Wicked This Way Comes looks amazing. Like if I could ever do concept art, or maybe dare I say even use AI generated art, and then like send it to a filmmaker saying, "Hey, this is what I think these places and these people look like for Something Wicked This Way Comes." And so yeah, I will watch the movie. I know a lot of it deviates from the book. I will watch the movie, but man, I love that book. Oh, that's see. Here's the thing. You know, someone who was it? Was it Sweet Chris of mine? He asked me if I what my favorite movie was. I will say I love many books, but I could confidently say my favorite story. Um, my favorite story. I have a lot of them, but man, my favorite story, easy in the top 3, Something Wicked This Way Comes. I was so moved by that story. Like, I love that story. It was a story I wish I had written. It was one of those things. It's like, it's so, uh, I mean, not everything, not everything I would dream up myself like, "Oh, I wish I wrote that," but come on, it's Ray Bradbury. You can't 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 go wrong, really, even with his weaker stuff. But Something Wicked This Way Comes is amazing. Man, it's almost 7. Um, let's see. Andrea says, "Did you know Army Hammer was supposed to be Batman? Did you see that?" I probably knew that as a fact at one point. I can't see it myself, but you know that's what actors do. They can act really well if they know their stuff. Um, Samuel says, "You know that did happen to me when I saw Something Wicked This Way Comes. It didn't live up to what I imagined the book, even though it's still good." Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I don't think it will ever be as good as what I have in my imagination, just subjectively speaking, as far as my experience. But I would love that film to be animated, like beautiful 2D animation with the technology we have now. That would be amazing. It probably could really work as an anime film, to be honest. But yeah. So, all right. So let's move on to just a little bit of channel update. So as I had mentioned before, because of getting married in 5 weeks and stuff like that, working two jobs, and planning and all that, all my creative time really will be like if I have any time off before I sleep, it's composing music, it's writing. So YouTube has to be put at the back burner. But I can do something like live stream and stuff like that, and maybe I can cut out some stuff from my live stream and make it into a video or something like that, or post shorts or something. But that's so probably in November. And what I'm thinking, what I definitely want to start doing in November is getting back to SuperCollider. People say, "You always say that. You always go back to SuperCollider." I'm actually at a point now where I can do effective at least for a stint, I can effectively teach good SuperCollider instruction for things that might be random, but are really important to know if you're in not just in SuperCollider, but just in with sound synthesis in general. Like, what does this mean? Oh, that's what that means. And I've discovered a few things in SuperCollider that I'm like, dang, this is gonna be really important, especially in the way of application for composing things like rhythm and stuff. So starting in November, I will go back to I call them Super Collider demos, and I still may. But if they're legit as far as instruction, I just might call them Super Collider tutorials. Yeah, whatever. Like they're some of my a lot of my Super Collider videos are demos. Like, hey guys, I might be redundant. I might not be saying the exact thing I should be saying. But I'm getting better at that. Ever since I started posting my code publicly, which I haven't done in a few months, sorry, because I've been without a computer. I'll get back to that. The more I was posting my code on Pastebin, I have a Pastebin. If you just look up Sound Engraver on Pastebin, you can see some of my code there. Not a lot. I got to get back to it, but um, I started realizing how I really can, in a very informal way, not like a professor, but in an informal way, instruct Super Collider knowledge. So I will be going back to that, especially. The second thing I want to do, I'll always be talking about things like science fiction. That's important to me. The more I read about science fiction or read science fiction, I will be doing science fiction videos. A lot of people do like it. They turn to those videos, and I love science fiction so much. I'll still always endeavor to do soundtracks, particularly with video games. That's more going to be into the next year because they're so involved. But I do want to veer my channel just a little bit more to music stuff, whether on a live stream or just in general, just a topical thing about music that can still apply to culture or pop culture. I think we've come to the point in our pop culture discourse where like nothing is new anymore. Everything is the same. Everything is, as Ray Bradbury said to these students. I think in the early aughts he was speaking as a guest lecturer, and he's like, and don't read. He was like 90 at the time or 80 at the time. He's like, don't read any of this modern fiction because it's all crap. It's like that's what it is. Like that. I don't need to say anything that is new to anyone anymore. Just um, so I'll be, yeah, once in a while I'll go back into popular culture stuff, but it's not going to be on the level as it had been in the last few years. I can't imagine. Um, like so if I do talk about pop culture, I'd be talking about how cool Batman is or how cool Luke Skywalker is, or reading. I'd like to start reading comics of the Silver Age, and like to read Batman comics and Superman comics and stuff like that. So it'd be older stuff if I got into the pop culture stuff. Anyway, so that's kind of where it's gonna lean toward into the holidays. Big Al asked me to do a Christmas concert, so I might do a Christmas concert. Yeah, if it's okay, if it's, how picky I am with compression and audio compression with StreamYard and stuff, but that's what it's going to be. So I think that's everything I need. I've updated you with, and I thank you guys so much for just tuning in and catching up and stuff like that. Oh, if I have a topic next week, I think I will have a topic. It depends if I can prepare enough for it, because I think it's important to talk about, and I'll just try. I'll try to mentally prepare for it. I'm sure it's going to be fine as is, but I'd like to have a little bit more know-how into it. But I do have thoughts. There's Al with his Christmas tree. Oh, man, I see those Christmas trees. I'm so happy. Like, yeah, guys, we're in the holiday season. I love. Just for the record, we start celebrating the holiday season in September, so that's like 1/3 of the year we're celebrating the holidays, and I love it. It's great. But the topic that I want to talk about next week, unless I have something else to talk about, I'd like to talk about AI, in particular AI with music. Thanks for these super chats. Thank you for helping me with our wedding. Daniel. I will say, okay, we'll talk about AI in just a second, but thank you. You in for a Christmas concert on my channel? Oh, you mean rewatching or watching live? I will always tune in to if you're doing uh, whatever we did last year. That was fun. Yeah, that was eventful. So yeah, if you want me to come on as a guest for if you were thinking about doing another show, yeah, I'd love to be a guest on your channel for that. Because since I'm not into movies like you guys are, I just have nothing to say unless I know the movie. But oh, Houston Symphony Round 2, huh? Are you gonna come in with a different identity? Yeah, I'd love to see the Houston Symphony with you guys. Yeah, I definitely will. I'd love to come on your show for that. That'd be fun. That's always a nice time. Because I love watching the symphony if I can. So and I do miss it. But yeah, Brian Gilmartin says AI can be is a pretty scary topic. Not gonna lie. I would like to. I want to come at it from a different angle than everyone is coming at it. Like especially with music. Everyone is just doom and gloom about AI in general, and I would home in on music specifically, but I would talk about it really in the application sense, like for film or writing and stuff like that. I will say this. I'll give you a little bit of a tease. I am not cynical like most people are cynical about AI. Now, I'm not on board with AI either. Like I'm not like I'm probably giving myself away a little bit like, oh, this is boring. Sound engraver is kind of neutral on AI. I want to I want to talk about more the public reaction. Yes, with music, yes, for sure. But I can't speak for writing. I can't speak for the public education. I can't speak for film. I can't speak for visual art. A little I can, but I can speak for music. And I'm okay with AI existing for music for very different reasons that people would suspect. Like, oh, you're going to use AI to generate music, to use it as a tool or something like that. Not necessarily. I think AI is going to, at least temporally. I'm not going to. It's not a. I'm not gonna say my thoughts. That will have to be next week. But let's just say I am not doom and gloom. People I would say, are scared a little bit. I don't have a reason to be scared, and I'll tell you why next week if that's the topic. So anyway, so yeah, I'm a humanist, I guess. No, is that the right word to use? I'm optimistic when it comes to things like this. So anyway, it is getting late, and since I work very long day Mondays, I work a full shift at this retail, and then I go straight to teaching. I used to have my Monday evenings. Now I go to teaching. Yeah, if I hadn't said it before, I have like 22 students, which is awesome, and I think that's going to continue getting more and more. So, oops, sorry, I just put up your super chat because I thought I had it up. Okay, thanks for the super chat. Thank you. Oh, I wanted to say too, before I go, thank you so much for the super chats. You know, it's helping with the wedding for sure. I'm very close to making the threshold for my first YouTube. You know, I was monetized last October. It'll be a year, October 1st, since monetized, but I never really made money. I just made change, like chump change. So if more things like super chats and ad revenue continues, I can make the threshold. If you guys aren't aware of when you're monetized on YouTube, you can make money off of YouTube, but you don't get the payout until you make $100 threshold. So like if you make $15 off of super chats, for instance, like one stream, yeah, that $15 you make, that's yours, but it kind of stays in this little pool until you pass $100. Then you get the payout, and it's like, okay, I guess that's insurance for YouTube or whatever. I don't know, but so I've never made the threshold yet. So I'm like 70. I'm about 75% there, you know, like, or I'm at like $70. So it would be nice to have my first YouTube payout before the before my wedding, but I'll be fine if I have my first payout before the end of the year. So very happy about that. But yes, to your point, Daniel, I will definitely be there for the Houston Symphony. In any case, I would love to bid you good night, and so I can have my date night with my prof and get ready for that. And it's good streaming, feels good. I would like to start streaming again. So look out for a stream on AI next Sunday, if all goes well, if I don't get sick again or whatever. And yeah, thanks guys so much for tuning in. I just love streaming. I missed it, and you guys are wonderful to have dropped by. So have a good rest of your Sunday, and I will see you next week. Take care.